As Arkansas's population grows, so do our energy demands. But with the right mix of resources, reliable, affordable power will always be a reality. These resources are all around us in our rivers, blowing through our trees, even right below our feet. The answer isn't focusing on one resource, it's embracing them all. The electric cooperatives of Arkansas know that a balanced approach to power builds our communities and powers our dreams. Visit themixmatters.com and see why there's power in knowledge.
First of all, Asa Hutchinson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here today.
Glad to be with you, Roby.
This past week, the Arkansas legislature dealing with a teacher insurance funding issue, dealing with prison overcrowding, dealing with restrictions on the lottery. Let's talk about the Public School Employees Insurance Fund and that crisis there. Do you advocate, support some of the changes that they've made, particularly the removal of spouses who have other alternatives, the part-time employees from the teacher insurance plan?
Well, no one's particularly excited about cutting off the part-time employees, but that's really what the private sector is doing in order to protect the insurance for their full-time employees. And the same thing with the teachers. We've got to have a priority on our teachers' insurance. This is a decision that the consultant for the task force made. And so, yes, I'm for protecting the teachers' insurance fund. These are two necessary steps to avoid a crisis and the failing of the entire fund. But we have to remember that what this legislative solution is now in an emergency situation does not mean we have to stop addressing the challenges. And so the task force is going to continue on for another year, and I'm anxious to see what additional steps need to be taken down the road to make sure we aren't in a crisis mode every month or every 6 months in dealing with the teachers' insurance fund.
You don't want to call special sessions repeatedly if you're elected governor, is what you're saying, I suppose.
We need a permanent fix.
One of the things that has been talked about in terms of coming out of this session is they may look at privatizing that teacher insurance fund in terms of grouping school districts into large, medium, and small size to see if they can create some pools and bid that out privately. Do you support that?
Well, I support looking at it. I think we need to look at the different options, but of course the concern is the smaller school districts and that their insurance would go out the roof if they just utilize the teachers within that district. So you've got to create a larger pool. We'll see if that is feasible. So I think our first mission is to let's get this plan stabilized, the insurance rates not going up for the teachers dramatically, and then let's look at different options long term. That can be looked at. Let's see what they say on that.
Let's turn to your jobs plan. The main reason I invited you to come here this morning with us is to take a look at, you got a 6 points, kind of 6 priorities in your jobs plan. I'll pull them up here, and we've consolidated a couple of them: tax competitiveness, workforce education, healthcare reform, regulatory reform, choice in education, and computer science. Let's begin first with tax competitiveness. You want to see some change to the tax cut rate, or to the tax rates in Arkansas. Kind of walk me through the generally speaking what you want to do in terms of that.
It's not a complicated plan. We have to have a competitive tax rate in Arkansas. Our 7% rate does not compete with Texas, all of our surrounding states. Missouri just lowered their income tax rate. So we are an island of high tax rate in Arkansas for individuals. We've got to get that down to be competitive with our surrounding states. My plan is to lower it from 7% to 6%, starting with the middle income folks, which would be from $20,000 to $75,000 in round numbers. That's our middle income. You prioritize them, reduce it a full percentage point, and some of those are at the 6% level now in the lower bracket, and so that would go down to 5%. So a full percent reduction in rate, which is equivalent to a 15% reduction in your tax rate, and that's will help us to be competitive. It is a good start for a tax competitive plan for Arkansas. The whole objective is job creation and be able to compete with our surrounding states. That's a necessary first step that we have to take.
What went into the construction of that zone of income levels that you're talking about there, that 20,000 to 75,000 range there? Why not $1 more, $1? I mean, you're leaving some folks out, bottom line.
Well, yes, but who are the people that are hurting most? It's the middle income. That's the segment of our society that has struggled. They're having the burden of paying more taxes than their share versus those that are in other income categories, and they're the ones that need relief and are hurting working 2 and 3 jobs. We've created a lot of programs for those in the lower income category. It's the middle income that's hurting. You've got to focus tax relief, and whenever you're looking at a limited amount that you can afford, which is we've vested in $100 million of tax relief for the first year. That is a doable amount of money. It's a prudent approach. You focus it and prioritize it. That's the middle income.
Is that $100 million, that is built on growth revenue primarily, is it not? I mean, what we're seeing in terms of kind of year-over-year growth in terms of the net available general revenue?
Well, that's $100 million loss of recurring revenue.
Correct.
But we have that amount in surplus, so it gets you through the point that you can grow into the next phase. And so I think it's a very prudent approach. It's very concrete, though, at the same time. And so obviously everything is contingent upon growing revenues and making sure we can meet all the needs of our state and obligations to education. But I'm confident that with the surplus that we have, with the targeted amount that I've focused on, that it is very doable.
What's your contingency plan if that $100 million isn't there for some reason, somehow it's not? What if it's $70 or $80 million? Do you lose some on the top end of the brackets of what you want to shrink, or what's your contingency plan?
Well, you always have to look at the budget as a whole. Mm-hmm. And you put together the budget with the surplus that we have, with our expectation of growth, which has been consistent over every year. I don't believe there's any doubt that we can do what I outlined. Now, but you look at the budget, everything from, you know, what you want to do with the Quick Action Closing Fund. How much do you fund that? You know, how much is we going to be able to do for higher education? You know, the debate over the prisons and whether we have to build a new prison or not. Our parole office, all of that's a part of the big budget picture. And I've looked at all of that, and the $100 million tax cut 2015 is workable within that budget. Obviously, you know, if our growth does not materialize as we expect, you got to make tough decisions. We'll wait and see when we get there.
No tough decisions this morning is what you're telling me. Let's talk about workforce education. One of the things that you want to do is create some councils across the state. I believe 8 of them. My math may be wrong on that, but one of the things that you've said in your jobs plan, and I want to pull up a graphic on this we've got, it's a Hutchinson administration will work to create a system that represents the various and diverse regions of the state. Talk to me about what's diverse about different regions of the state in terms of workforce education. How is workforce education different in MENA versus, say, Mountain Home?
Well, for example, Mountain Home, they have their economic development plan that includes tourism. Now, MENA also includes tourism, but Mountain Home has a real focus on that. They have a retirement community, they have manufacturing, and so their economic plan in that region will say these are the jobs that we want to prioritize for the next decade, where we're going to try to recruit industry in, expand, and put our focus on. So obviously, if that's your economic plan, let's do our workforce education to train toward the jobs. That all makes sense to me. And so, you know, obviously there's basic ones that you need. I mean, carpentry, welding, I mean, you need that in every environment. But the specialties of hospitality, the specialties in some manufacturing is unique to a particular region and what they want to prioritize. It could be in further processing of food in the agricultural community, or labor for our farm operations. So our workforce education, our job skill training should be geared toward the economic plan and not separated from it.
Got to ask you about computer science. This is a big component of your jobs plan here. You want computer science taught in every high school. You want it to be available for credit. You say it's going to be good for jobs, good for entrepreneurship. What's the price tag on putting that in every school? You got to have teachers to do it. You got to have some degree of hardware and software there to do it too.
Well, the hardware and software is already being put into the schools, and so let's double utilize it for the purpose of teaching computer science. The whole cost of it is less than $500,000, because it doesn't cost anything to change the law to give credit for computer science as a math or a science graduation credit. That costs no money at all, and that's the incentive to take the course. Secondly, you've got to retrain enough math or science teachers so that you could have one in every high school in Arkansas. We've looked at the training costs there. You could probably do it pro bono because there's so many groups that want to teach coding for computers in the high schools to develop the curriculum. But the training cost, which we would probably cover, would be $500,000. So it's a very modest investment for an incredible return. And if we had only 5% of our graduates take computer science, because it's not mandated, you'd be creating 1,500 new computer science or programmers every year in Arkansas, which would change our economy.
Last question for you. Let's talk about regulatory reform. You say basically that state regulations on business should be designed to protect our environment, our citizens, and the safety of our workers. Too often they lack kind of common sense. Name me a regulation that you think needs to be eliminated, and tell me a good regulation, one that you think is on the books now that is a proper one to keep maintained.
Well, whenever you look at our regulatory environment, the big problem is that we're not processing our permits for air quality for manufacturing facilities quick enough. In Louisiana, they process a application for a manufacturing facility for an air quality permit 3 months quicker than we do in Arkansas. Texas they have it streamlined even more than that. And this is what industry wants you to be responsive to. They want to protect the environment. Let's just move it through very quickly. Second,
so it's not a particular, there's not a particular regulation on the books you want to see overturned. You're talking about the process of regulation.
The process of regulation, but at the same time, you also want to fight against some overreaching regulations from the federal level, and there's a state role to play. The President just rolled out the new EPA regulations, bypassed Congress on this. It's a war on carbon, a war on coal that would adversely impact Arkansas because we're more dependent on coal than some other states. And so I would gather our industry, but also our state regulators together and say they're inviting public comment. Let's express our opposition to it as to how it would hurt manufacturing in Arkansas, how it would hurt the consumers because utility rates would go up. We just built a coal-fired generating plant in South Arkansas. It is state-of-the-art quality, has all the scrubbers, meets all of the EPA regulations, but as soon as the new regulations go into place, that is out of date. Tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, more money has to be invested from the ratepayers to bring that up to speed. That hurts us in Arkansas.
But as governor, just filing public comments that in opposition to that, is that going to stop the EPA from going forward with it? I mean, what else can you do?
Well, I would like to think the administration is very sincere about inviting public comments. Why do you have public comments? It's because you want to take those into consideration as to how you move forward. So absolutely. Secondly, I think there is some question as to the legal authority for those regulations, and the state should consider challenging those regulations. So this is a different approach to a regulatory environment. The second thing I would do is put in a moratorium immediately as I become governor so that we would stop the new regulations coming into place without the cost-benefit analysis going into place. So those are a couple of very specific actions that would be in place. You asked me about something I like.
Yeah. Well,
obviously, we want to protect the Buffalo River. And it's obviously important that we do not allow these very large-scale hog operations in our state that would jeopardize our natural streams. And so we would tighten up that process. Obviously, it's a regulation that is important to protect our streams and our water quality that we value in this state. I grew up on the Spavinaw Creek, drinking out of the stream, and I think we all enjoy that great quality of the state.
Would you advocate shutting that hog farm down now that it's in operation?
No, the farmers didn't do anything wrong. The farmers went through the permit process, right. So don't penalize the farmer. But first of all, my commitment is to protect the river. And then secondly, you've got to make sure you tighten up the permitting process so that everyone has the notice, all the stakeholders, which they seem not to have the last time, not adequate notice out there. So the farmers did absolutely nothing wrong. They followed the rules. So don't penalize them, but let's protect the Buffalo River and the quality of life that we so value in this state.
Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate you.
Thank you.